apparently is, because of this reason, gigantically destructive.
Yeah. Yeah, that all sounds accurate to me. That now the interesting thing is that people can heal from that often. And heal together or separate.
Hmm.
And and a lot of the work I do in folks dealing with infidelity, again, whether they stay together or not, is to help them heal from all of that stuff you just said. It's interesting. I was, as you said, that story, I was thinking of a couple I worked with not long ago where it was almost, the numbers weren't exactly that, but almost that. It's like a couple had been married like 20 years and found out that 5 years ago he had an affair.
Hmm.
And it was very much it was the man who had the affair, and the woman was going through very much the stuff you were describing. It's like, well, I thought for 5 years something was true that wasn't true, and that's incredibly painful. Yeah, trauma indeed, because all the stuff you said. She's not merely thinking, "Oh no, he's been terrible." She's thinking, "I must be crazy not to have seen this, or stupid, or wrong."
Hmm.
She can't trust her own judgment anymore. All of those things are true. The initial phases of finding out you've been cheated on are a lot about that stuff. It's a lot about getting past that shock. And, it's shock and it's grief and it's anger. It's all of the above. And one after another in whatever combination they happen to occur in a given moment. And so recovering from that, yeah, it takes, that's a lot of the early work is that. And what's interesting is when if I could sort of fast forward to look at when they've recovered from that. Now, it's not like it's all or nothing, but when they've done a lot of work and by whatever means, be it therapy or otherwise, when you look back on it, when you've healed from that kind of trauma, you look back on it and it's interesting because then they're able to look back on those 5 years that initially they were thinking, oh my God, it was all a lie, and realized, no, it wasn't. There was lying. That's bad. But it wasn't all a lie, actually. There was actually some good times in there. I find this same phenomenon. I mentioned earlier, I used to do a lot of work with people recovering from various kinds of trauma, PTSD type stuff. And very often when somebody was dealing with trauma that they experienced as a child, so they were, sexually abused by a parent or something like that, or, all sorts of traumas that can happen to people as kids. And I'm working with them as adults. And they're dealing with stuff that maybe for years when they were reminded of it, consciously or not, they would go into something of a panic or they would break down or, it was hugely painful. And they would work on that and they would process the trauma in such a way that they could say, I can think about it now. It was horrible, but I can think about it now and it doesn't get to me now because I realize it's not happening now. I realize I'm an adult now. I have power I didn't have then. I'm okay now. And then they can look back and say, I used to not be able to think about my childhood at all, or not be able to think about that period of time at all, or not be able to think about any time we ever spent with that particular uncle at all, whatever. Now I can look back and I can think about that stuff. It's like, yeah, there was the bad stuff in there, but there's also this other stuff that wasn't. They sort of get their life back. When people have processed the trauma of, let's say, infidelity, it's not only that they can be okay going forward, they actually get their past back as well. They don't have to be traumatized by the past. They can look at it with perspective. They can come to, really what they can end up doing when it goes well is what I call forgiveness. And I didn't make up, this particular use of the word forgiveness, but forgiveness is that sense that says, I don't have to be angry at you about this anymore. It wasn't good. I don't condone it, but I can get past the anger and then we can figure out, all right, what do we do about trust, which is a whole different question. I can forgive somebody I don't trust. I can forgive somebody I have no intention of restoring a relationship with.